So after decided where, you need to decide how you're going to enter. And actually, you have different types of way to enter a market. And the big difference between the different modes is the level of resource commitment, from very low level of resources commitment, meaning financial resources, to very high level of resources commitment. So you have two big modes, the non-equity modes and the equity modes. If I look at the non-equity modes, you have again two big categories. You have the exports. You can export directly. So from Belgium, you export directly to another country. So indirectly through another company or an organization specialized to accompany export, or you probably have other ways. So that's the pretty straightforward export way, which is usually the first modes you use to test if there is a demand for your products in a market. It's with a low level of risk and a low level of resource commitment. Then if you want to go one step further, you have contractual agreement. So you can decide to sell a license or a franchise in the country. You can work with sales agents, or a very specific type is the contracted R&D. So that's really there. You have a contract, so it's already a bit more risky, and obviously you are already a bit more committed, so it's more difficult to stop from one day to another if you decide not to pursue your expansion in that country. And then you have the equity modes. The first equity mode would be alliances or joint ventures. So you can have a minority joint venture. So you will close a deal with a local company to create a new company, but you will take a minority stake. So it's less risky for you, less commitment, less money to invest, but obviously you don't have the control, and so you are diluted and you cannot really take the decisions. Then you can go for 50-50 GVs, very well balanced GV, but then obviously you need to have a partner you trust. Otherwise, it can quickly block, of course. And then you can, of course, go yourself for a majority GV. So that's the opposite, obviously. So you will need to invest more resources, take more risk, but at least you are the owner, and you can take the decision. And all those options here, it's what we call strategic alliances. So a license, a franchise, an agent, a joint venture, that's an alliance. And then obviously the last mode, that's the wholly owned subsidiary. You can invest from scratch. You do your first, your own investment in a country, you build your factory, your offices, and so on. So you do everything from scratch, or you do an acquisition. So you will buy a majority stake in a company abroad to accelerate your international expansion. So as I said, as you move from left to right, it's more risky and you need to commit more financial and human resources. But all those options are obviously possible, and you need to select the one that is most suited to your needs. And guess what? You have advantages and disadvantages for each of them. So I will not go into the detail. Let you read through the slide, but it's important to know that. And then again, it's based on the assessment of the market to decide the best entry mode. What's important to keep in mind as well is that those entry modes are not exclusive, and they can be progressively combined, usually with an increasing level of investment and control. So any combination is basically possible, but if you take a 2x2 matrix again, you take the level of its investment here from minus to plus, and the level of control from minus to plus. A usual journey would be to start with export, so low investment, but low control, but low risk. So you start there. Then, okay, you see it works. There are demands for your product in the country, so you move there. You will work with someone in the country. So it requires a bit more money to invest, but you have a bit more resources. You can be faster on the market and so on. And then it's really working. So then I will go for a subsidiary. I will either acquire or I will directly invest, but not fully integrated with my company. And then if it's still a success, you move to the fully owned subsidiary, fully integrated with you, with a central coordination or not. So that's one journey. Another one could be to start with licensing, then go for GV to go there. And you can even go back in time. So any journey is possible. It will really depend on your market, on your needs, and on the risk you're willing to take. In some cases, the development stage of a country is a good indicator to select the most appropriate mode of entry. So take a country that is opening. For example, it was China in the 90s. It's obviously not the case anymore, but 30 years ago when China was opening, but there, you saw that the middle class was growing. They were willing to consume differently, but okay, it was quite uncertain. So at that time, you would have probably select the export, right? Then you have countries that are peaking. Think China in the beginning of 2000. It was peaking. There at that moment, you can more think about a joint venture or a greenfield. China today, a very mature country there, you can think about an acquisition, obviously. And then if a country is closing, it's down the curve, it's not growing as fast, then you will probably go for an acquisition as well. So also looking at the specificity of a country will help you to decide which entry mode to select. So this one is important as well. Then there is a very interesting model that I like. It's called the Uppsala model, just because it was developed at the University of Uppsala in Finland. Sorry. And this model suggests that a firm progressively increases its level of commitment in a slow stage-by-stage process. So it's not from scratch that you do that. So if you look here on this axis at the number of markets you are in, and the mode of operation. So again, from export to really acquisition. And so if you go through this axis, it means that you diversify in terms of geographies, and here you are more and more committed. Usually, you will simply follow this curve. You will start big. You will first move to one country through export. It will be more like steps there, and progressively, when you're very used to enter into several markets, then you will probably quickly move with acquisition. And a very good example is the IKEA examples. Actually, after it started, during 20 years, between 1943 and 1963, IKEA was only active in Sweden. So for 20 years, they stay in their home country. And then in 1963, they opened they closed their first partnership in a neighboring country in Norway. So it took them 20 years to have a first partnership abroad. And then it was still pretty slow. And then they focus in the 70s, they focus on European expansion, and that's only as from the 90s that they really they went for full internationalization. So they took them 50 years, and then in a few years, IKEA was everywhere. So you have a bit this exponential effect, but it's also linked to the liability of outsidership that we saw a bit before in the class. Of course, today things are a bit different, and so you have this concept of born global or international new ventures firm. So I don't read the definition, but today you see that more and more companies, they are global almost instantly. Think about Amazon, Tesla, Skype, Spotify. If you look at Zoom, for example, I'm sure now many of you have used video conference with Zoom. Zoom was, it was not so well known a few years ago, and then all of a sudden, also because of the crisis, they are directly global. And of course, you have criticism regarding the security and so on, but it's really an example of a born global firm. They didn't need to open first a local market; they were directly global, and they have some common characteristics. Those firms. The first one is often you will see them in technology. It's a lot in IT, in new technology. So the Netflix, the Zoom, the Amazon, the Spotify, and so on. That's mainly technological companies. Most of the time, you will see that the CEO of those firms has a very global mindset and has a strong international outlook. The guys have traveled. They often comes from immigrant families. They have a very open mindedness, and so for them, they consider the world as their garden, I would say. They emphasize a lot on differentiation strategy, and they typically use external independent intermediate for distribution. They go for rather low resources requirements. Then the when to enter. That's very important there, the timing of entry. And actually, there is no right or wrong answer, or at least you cannot know it in advance. But what is sure is that you can enter first in a market or late in a market. And in both cases, you can have first mover or late mover advantages. And you have benefits in both cases. So I advise you to read them. I will not read them, but you have advantages in both cases. And yeah, sometimes you need to be first. Sometimes it's better to wait a bit. Successful early movers. Well, things about FedEx. They were the first to pioneer express delivery. Now they are in the world. Airbus. They were the first to build a global plane, and they're still there. Kleenex, Walmart, Toyota. So all those companies, they've started international expansion very early, and they are global brands. But in some cases, you've had unsuccessful early players. They had the product, they had understood the needs, but they were maybe a bit too early. Think about MySpace. Many of you probably don't know it, but actually, MySpace was the first Facebook, and they were very popular at the moment, and then it collapsed. Think about BlackBerry. BlackBerry was so in advance that they had understood the concept of smartphone, but the execution was probably too narrow, and then the iPhone arrived and it collapsed. Think about in Belgium, Take It Easy. They were among the first to do that, and then came Uber Eats and Deliveroo. Think about Alta Vista. It was actually there before Google. Think about Netscape, was there before Internet Explorer. Atari was there before Sony PlayStation, and so on. So all those companies, they were probably there too early, and they were not able to test the market. And then someone else came, identify some flows, and were able to take the market. Okay, I will stop there, and then we will enter into the last section of the class.